Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, August 27th, 2025, and today we're going to be answering three questions we've been hearing from international educators over the last 7 days. And as we do each week on the Roundup, we take our news stories from our newsletter that comes out on Monday mornings, and that's available at smieconsulting.org/subscribe. If you scroll down and hit the subscribe button, you can enter your details and you receive an email version of the newsletter in your inbox every Monday morning at about 9 a.m. Eastern. If you prefer to get your international ed news via LinkedIn, I will also be dropping the link to that most recent edition, both the email and the LinkedIn version of the newsletter in the chat, so you have that for reference. But on that smieconsulting.org/subscribe page, there's also a button that will take you direct to the LinkedIn version of the newsletter where you can subscribe and get that a half hour earlier in your notifications on LinkedIn. So with that newsletter each week, we take a look at the social media stories, and that can cover everything from how social media is being used in international education to connect students and universities. It is also covering webinars coming up in the following week or two, looking at how AI is being used, how other digital tools are being leveraged to recruit international students. So all of that is in the social media section. Then there is US Central, and that is where we look at the top level news stories in the United States related to international education, whether it's the latest presidential executive order, pieces of legislation that may have a chance of passage, to anything proposals and changes within the Department of Homeland Security or the Department of State that impact international education, to advocacy efforts to restore funding to exchange programs. Whatever the case may be, they cover a broad range of topics in that section. We also then move to Solutions Central, where we cover some of the positive news stories, some ideas that are new that institutions are implementing to help bridge gaps or connect students or to reach a new market. We'll talk about those in the Solutions Central, and then we'll wrap up with a global roundup. And we do that each week to take a look at how international education issues are evolving in other destination markets for international students, and how important having a perspective on what's happening in the wider world of international education and global student mobility is important to help better understand what we can be doing here in the United States to improve how we approach international education. So that's the newsletter. You've got both links in the chat, both to the email version of this week's edition and to the LinkedIn version. For those who are regular listeners to the podcast or watching this live on LinkedIn, Facebook, or YouTube, we tackle three questions each week here on the Midweek Roundup that we see developing in the newsletter stories on the Monday. And then we answer those more in depth, give you our next level thoughts on what these topics might mean for what we do in international ed. So let's get right into this week's topics. And that first one up is where can AI be used in international student enrollment? We see this at SMIE Consulting. I'm sure many of you are seeing it on campus in terms of how AI is being implemented across different disciplines at your institution, how perhaps it may even be within each class. There is an element of AI or a discussion about AI and how it can be used positively or negatively to affect what they do in the classroom and in life. And I think we're seeing more and more that AI, particularly generative AI, prompt engineering, all the different models of AI that exist nowadays, that are in app versions, that are in various web browsers built in, that are in Microsoft Copilot 365, all of these different types of AI forms that we see. We know about ChatGPT, obviously, and Gemini in the Google browser. All of these tools are now widely available, free of charge. There are paid versions of all of them, obviously, but we see different ways that AI is being used on campus, in the classroom, in admissions offices, by to assist in the reading of applications in terms of transcript evaluation, in terms of generating GPAs, in terms of variety of different ways that within the admissions process, using anti-AI to test to see if essays for those institutions that still require it, how AI is maybe AI detectors tools that are out there that can evaluate whether students' essays are legit or whether they are generated in part or in whole by by artificial intelligence means. So there are ways that it's happening in the admissions decision-making process and how admissions offices evaluate applicants, but it's also being used in many other ways before students even get to institutions. We see one of our good colleagues, Girish Balola, has started a new column on his LinkedIn feed, much like I do with our newsletter. He's been doing on AI-related topics through his company, Gen Next Education. And the last week, he introduced a new blog that focused on AI and education integrity and infrastructure. He's originally from India. He talks about in the first part of that article how the CBSE, the largest state board in India, that is evolving in their standard 10 and 12 exams, that you see that AI is now being used as a learning context and in plumbing of quality assurance, as he comments in his article. You see it in potentially being used in the grading of certain parts of the exams in the CBSE system, and the faster turnaround time that will mean for students wanting to get the results to help them navigate their way into post-secondary opportunities. He also references with the EU, they have now created ethical guidelines for educators on using AI for students in schools, in universities, as well as secondary schools. So very much taking hold throughout education and throughout our daily lives, to be honest. And it's a matter of what area, and probably a shorter list of what areas of life won't be touched by AI in one way, shape, or form. So Guresh's article certainly is a good column to subscribe to on how it's being used in education, particularly in schools and in universities around the world. We then also turn to ISF Monitor, who regularly posts on tech-related topics, and this past week, they have an important article on how AI is being used in search. And that is something that you wonder about. Well, the students have various college search engines that they use that maybe they're maybe bypassing those search engines, or those search engines are being referenced as part of a generative AI search for information on college search. They might set up, if they're smart, they set up an AI agent for themselves, inputting their key academic criteria, their involvement in clubs and organizations, if they're applying to selective U.S. institutions, where they can create an agent that goes searching for schools that might be the best fits for them. And perhaps removing college search sites altogether from the process. So there's some really interesting shifts happening in how students are using AI, not just in their applications if they're writing essays, but also prior to that in terms of identifying institutions that might be good fits for them. So generative AI is taking over search as well. So the ISF Monitor article talks about three different highlights here. That researchers are reporting a significant shift in search activity this year, with younger users relying more on generative AI tools for search queries. Also, this trend is especially notable when it comes to prospective students' searches for study options, with education being one of the most prominent categories for website traffic referred by ChatGPT. And finally, this shift to AI-involved search appears likely to usher in substantial changes in our strategies and tools for search optimization and search marketing. So How will that be? How will AI, in terms of AI bots crawling our sites for information that can be matched up to individual student queries on eligibility for admissions, to scholarships, to other things that are important to students in looking for an institution where they might want to attend. So really a broad range of topics in terms of how AI is being used. We've seen that happen quite a bit lately in almost week by week. There's more articles on, and certainly new vendors that are coming into the market with different tools for international students to use, or just students in general to use in their the search for how we as institutions can be using AI-related tools to help us identify appropriate students, so we can use it as well. The students can use it to search for good institutional fits for themselves. And what as institutions we can be doing is to have generative AI prompts to identify students that might be good fits for us. I can do that in a number of different ways. We can potentially be automating tasks through AI to set up initial appointments for us, to schedule various tools. Obviously, we all know about AI chatbots. Most all of us have them on our sites now that can help answer much more comprehensive questions than they might have previously been able to ask than in years past, as long as they're constantly being fed the updated information and using responses to learn from a human element needs to be there to evaluate the responses to see if they're on point or not, and to adjust the learning accordingly if they're not. And that's certainly a piece of the puzzle we have control over as institutions. One thing we're trialing right now at University of Akron, where I work full-time, is we are looking at ways with a particular vendor we're using. We who has been doing lead generation campaigns through Facebook, Instagram ads in a couple different countries. We are using two different methods to set up appointments for those students who have filled out a form, gotten into our community, online community, and potentially would be interested in admissions information. We're using an AI voice to call students using the numbers they provided to schedule appointments with myself or one of our other admissions counselors, depending on undergraduate or graduate interest. And then potentially following up with a local contact in one of the two countries to answer more specific questions if they weren't answered by the AI agent. So we are using AI in our admissions process now, and I'm sure there are other examples out there of different vendors who are doing different things to qualify students throughout the funnel. Admissions funnel to identify the top prospects. There's scoring that's been used in CRMs before, but there are other ways that can be automated and then reordered and prompted for follow-up depending on how they're interpreted based on the levels of interaction, points of contact, all of these kind of things that can be used. So a lot has surfaced in recent months in the AI world that the amount of traffic we're going to see on stories related to this, products and services that are being offered, and ways that students are using it, I can only see increases in the coming weeks and months as these tools become refined. Certainly nothing's 100% effective right out the gate, but certainly if you're committing to it, you certainly understand the need for regular feeding of information to the generative AI agents that you're creating to create the level of expertise that you need it to have to be effective long term and to be adaptive to the kind of changing circumstances that may be out there in the wider world. So quite a wide range, and like I said earlier, there's probably a shorter list of areas of international student enrollment from the student side or the university and college side that where AI can't be used than actually can be. So much more on that topic, I'm sure, in the weeks and months to come. Moving on to a much more substantial and immediate issue that international educators in the United States are dealing with and feeling at this time, and that is the potential elimination of DS. And that is the question, why is the elimination of DS such a big deal? For those unfamiliar with it, D/S is duration of status. For most visitors to the United States, they have a limited window of time that they can legally be in the United States. For a visitor visa, it might be 3 months, it might be 6 months, might be single entry, might be multiple entry, depending on the country of origin for that person. For other different categories of visa, worker visas, H visas, L visas, they're usually given out in 3 years at a time. I know when my family came to the U.S. in 1974, we came as L visas. I was an L2, intercompany transfer dependent, when I first entered the United States as a kindergartner and first grader. We eventually went through 6 years of L visa status to permanent residency status, and eventually became naturalized citizens, each of us in our family. And that certainly allowed us to go through that process. But we had finite times on our visas, and that affected how long we were able to stay in the United States. For students, it's a very different story currently. The visa that is stamped that's in the passport that every student receives, other than Canadians who don't need an actual visa to come into the United States, there is a date on their I-20, typically a program end date, that is when they first enter the country is when they are supposed to be finished with their studies. However, what is stamped on their I-20 and in their passport is that they are F1 or J1 D/S. And that D/S stands for duration of status. And that allows students in F and J and M categories the ability to stay in the country as long as they have maintained their legal student status. And that legal student status is typically boils down to being a full-time student, not working illegally during their time, and not doing anything else to violate their immigration status as an F1, FM, or J student. So that is a bonus, because when visas that might be issued by U.S. consulates or embassies abroad, again, the visa is the key to unlock the door to the United States. Border Patrol at immigration ports around the country lets them into the country and then stamps their paperwork appropriately. But for FM and J students right now, it's stamped F1, J1, M1, DS, that they can stay in as long as they are maintaining their status. And we spend significant amounts of time on campuses around the United States talking through in ISSS offices, in orientation, about the importance of maintaining your status. And that typically means being full-time, meeting all the other requirements to progress in your degree, and being able to as long as you're maintaining satisfactory progress and you stay full-time, you can even, up until your last semester, you are required to be full-time, but in your final semester you don't have to be full-time if you don't need more than half term or even one class to graduate. You can still be considered in legal status because you're completing your degree requirements. That date in the visa has a finite date when the student is first issued it. Typically 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, 4 years, depending on the country and the reciprocal agreements that might exist between the U.S. and the student's individual country. Their status in the United States is not determined by the visa, unlike most other non-immigrant visa categories. Their status in the United States is determined by the university that they're attending and whether the university, college, validating school, validating each term, whether that student is in legal status or not. Keep in mind, for international students, DS also continues into OPT and STEM OPT time. So as long as the student is in their student status, and OPT is part of student status, one of the benefits international students have, they are in DS. They're maintaining their duration of status because they're meeting all the requirements of their degree, and whatever, if it's OPT, as long as they're meeting all those OPT requirements in terms of working and notification of employers and all of those extra things they need to do when they're on OPT, they are in legal status. What the Trump administration is proposing is something to eliminate that DS, that would tie their initial time in the United States to a maximum of 4 years, no matter what degree they're doing. It might only be 2 years if they're in a master's degree program. It would be 4 years max, whether you're in a bachelor's, master's, PhD program, high school, whatever. 4 years would be the maximum, at least in the current scenario that was proposed. It hasn't a final rule yet. It's not open for public comment yet. It has actually been delayed as they're rewording it. Keep in mind, the Trump administration did try to do the same thing in the first administration in 2020, but the clock ran out on the administration to actually implement it before the elections in November 2020, and then that just died on the vine. The Biden administration did away with that potential change of rule. So we are in the holding pattern right now for whether this actually moves forward as a thing. We have once OMB and DHS get their ducks in a row and the rule is published, there is a public comment period, and there will be a massive advocacy campaign against this that NAFSA and the Alliance for International Exchange and other President's Alliance and other advocacy bodies, U.S. for Success Coalition, will be rallying support against this potential rule change. Why is it a big deal? Because it exponentially increases the amount of work that needs to be done by ISSS offices, by the students themselves to maintain their status if they are unable to finish their program within that initial 4 years. And any student who comes as an undergraduate, if they are able to complete their degree in 4 years, they would need to extend that visa, not just to get a new I-20 with the STEM OPT on it, but they would need to extend the visa proper, which typically visas aren't renewed from within, are not renewed from within the United States. There would need to be a new mechanism set up to allow for that to happen. Because if the only way to do it, given the current way visas are approved, is for them to have to leave the country, apply to U.S. consulate abroad, and then come back in, it just increases the workload. 100,000, 200,000 extra students a year having to do that to go home, renew the visa to come back in. The only way it would seem even practical, it's not a practical thing in most ISSS officers' eyes in terms of what this means, is it's requiring work that really has never needed to be required since 1991 to extend a visa or to renew a visa from within the United States. That's never been a thing. Since that was allowed. DS was first introduced in 1991. My entire professional career, DS has been a thing. When I started in 1993, that was already the case. Students were admitted DS, duration of status for their entire time, and that they maintain their status as students. And keep in mind, that could be maintaining status if you come in as a high school student, finish 4 years of a high school degree, then go on to university, finish a university degree after 4 years, work if you're in a STEM field, work for 3 years, come back, do a master's degree for 2 years, work for 3 years after that if it's a STEM degree, then come back and do a doctoral program for 5 years, and then do a 3-year STEM program after that, OPT program after that. And that is a DS. That's when a student could come in once on an initial student visa and then never leave, and be in the country for 4 years undergrad, 4 years high school, 4 years of undergrad, 3 years of STEM OPT for a bachelor's degree, which may take it up to 11. They do a master's degree, 13, and then 3 years of STEM OPT for a master's degree, 16. Come back for a doctorate program, 4 or 5 more years up to 2021, and then work 3 years after that. They could be in the country 24 years if they came in as a ninth grader to the time they finish a doctoral program. They could legitimately stay in legal student status throughout that time, as long as they've been maintaining their status all the way through. With this elimination of DS, that would no longer be possible. 4 years would be the maximum allowed, and that they're still working out how that process to renew or extend their program would be. We know about extending I-20s. That's a relatively simple process that's done internally on college campuses, that when a student has to, if their program end date is coming up, if they're not going to complete their degree on time, their program can be extended for another year or semester, depending on how long they might need. If they're transferring from a bachelor's to a master's degree straight away instead of doing OPT, then you could just change the level and issue a new I-20 for a new program that the student might be admitted to. The student not having to leave the country to get a new visa to come back in. That would change. There would need to be a new process created And who manages that? I think that's part of the holdup. They don't know how that's going to be handled, whether DHS suddenly it will issue these visas domestically versus them having to go home to their home country. How State Department would be involved in that, because they're the only ones that really issue those kind of visas to students coming from abroad. So there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of what this might look like, and we still don't know. We don't have the final rule yet, what the wording on it is. So we'll have to hold our breath. But the amount of extra work that's going to be required for students, that's going to be required of ISSS offices, is going to be immense, and it just becomes one more thing, one more hurdle, one more hoop, one more roadblock for students to potentially be scared off coming to the United States, or decide that's just way too much work. I don't want to have to do that anymore. We already have a very complex admissions process to our individual universities at many institutions around the world and around the country. But to put the additional federal burdens on, beyond the SEVIS fee they already have to pay, beyond the DS-160 fee that they already have to pay, students already are doing those now. Now probably there will be a fee involved for that process to redo their visas. So, and the terms on those, is it going to be another 4 years? Is it going to tie it to their I-20s? There's a lot of uncertainty, frankly, around what that might look like. So it is a big deal, and it would be an increased staff commitment that's going to be required, increased costs probably to the student for that process to extend a visa or to renew a visa, whatever it might look like from within the United States, if that's the process or the path that gets created. So we'll obviously keep you posted on that as to what that final rule looks like, and also what advocacy needs to look like when and if that rule does happen. We've seen how advocacy can work. We've seen this just this past week. Both the Academy, the Alliance for International Exchange, and NAFSA have reported on the well over 10,000, 12,000, 15,000, up to 20,000 different letters sent to members of Congress protesting what the OMB had done. Related to exchange programs that have federally funded exchange programs that Congress had already approved. OMB had the director of OMB had withdrawn those funds or eliminated those funds, and there was a huge upswell. It would have gotten rid of exchange programs that I know campuses I've been on have benefited for years. Kennedy Lugar, the YES program, UGrad program, all these different community college for international development CCIP programs, all these different programs across the board federally funded programs would have gone away. And it looks like funding has been restored. Fulbright's been protected. Some of these other ones might be coming back online and receiving the funding that Congress, frankly, already approved. So it was a really backhanded way, and shows some of the nefarious nature of what this administration is trying to do related to international education and the undercutting that's happening almost at every turn. We've seen it. It's the drip, drip, drip campaign. Every week something new, and it's good to see advocacy working. And it does work, and don't ever give up on that, because that is our one tool that we can all do, and it takes literally seconds. Clicking on a link, identifying your Congress folks, maybe adjusting the wording slightly in a letter, and it goes out to all the three of your U.S. congressional delegation for your local congressional rep, as well as your states, as your U.S. senators. It's so easy. It's dead simple. Everybody should be doing it, and I'm so glad and heartened by so many of us taking advantage of that opportunity to send those letters to the Hill. And we're hearing from folks, Mark Overman at the Alliance, saying that just record numbers of responses, advocacy efforts. So it does work. So keep it up, everybody, and make sure that you're staying tuned to those opportunities. We certainly will be posting about it in the newsletter. We'll be talking it about on here. Be checking your LinkedIn. These posts go out pretty regularly to update you on what's happening there. Now let's move on to our final question of the day, and what's happening with Aussie universities with the new cap that they've been saddled with in their country. We saw the government in Australia introduced a cap recently that was to limit the number of new student visas issued in 2025 to 200 and I think it's 265,000 students. I want to make sure I have that. 270,000 students for 2025, and that will increase to 295,000, so an increase of 25,000. That's a de facto cap. According to the national planning level that the government has put in place, and that's due to the ministerial direction 111 that the Australian government has put in place to answer these questions or to limit the amount of international students. Now, keep in mind that there's kind of a two-level cap in Australia. There's an initial cap of a maximum number of total student visas that will be issued in the coming year, and then there is also a per institution cap in terms of the number of students that each institution can receive, international students. So that's dependent on a variety of factors that have to do with the percentage of their population that is currently international, and other factors that are important for us, important for them to not be running afoul. It's unlike the British requirements that we've talked about last week that aren't necessarily caps, but are limits that individual institutions will have depending on their visa success rates in individual markets. And they can't have more than 10%, 5%, 10% per country of visa denials or overstays or any of these other factors that the British government puts in. Much stricter, and frankly ones that if we're in place in the US, don't tell anybody, would cause most of my colleagues to be out of a job very quickly if their institutions were banned from enrolling students from particular countries because they had high visa denial rates. Certainly, our process in the United States has always been much harder. Canada, Australia, UK traditionally had been 90+ percentage points at their lowest points for approval rates, usually in the 95 to 98% range for visa approval rates. And the process is very different. When I left Education USA, it was about 80% was the worldwide, 85% max was the worldwide visa success rate. It's now down to 60%, if that. And I can't wait to see the numbers from this fall because I'm sure it's quite a bit lower, probably closer to 50%. And that is down to a lot of factors. So this year changes with the introduction of the social media questions and the confusion about public profiles and how long those have to be. That's caused a lot of consternation. But in Australia, they don't have those issues to deal with. They have much easier times of getting visas, but it's just gotten double the price to apply for a student visa in Australia. With I think the cost now are well over $1,300 for just the visa process part of coming to Australia as a student, as opposed to us in the United States, where we're hovering at about under $500, certainly. So we have a lot of other costs elsewhere, testing and such, but certainly our costs are quite a bit lower. So there's some good articles about what Australian University is going through. ITS, or National Tech Sydney, University of Technology in Sydney has stopped 60 different programs at their institution, over 100 courses, excuse me. There are layoffs happening at Australian universities. There are real concerns outside of the most elite group of 8 institutions in Australia as to what their caps would look like and how much of an increase they might be getting. So there's a lot of consternation in Australia, and certainly doesn't make and this again is part of the perspective we always shoot for here, is to make sure that we're aware in the U.S. on how challenging, frankly, the world is amongst the big 4 countries right now. We had a post in the newsletter this week that the big 4, US, UK, Canada, Australia, is now in ISEF's eyes the Big 14. So quite a few more players have entered the scene, certainly in Europe and in South Asia, in the Middle East, Southeast Asia and the Middle East. There are now players that, country level players that are attracting quite a bit more attention, that have higher regarded programs. We've seen Seoul become the top international student city in the world. Many more Asian destinations are getting on the radar. So we really see a diversification of destinations that students have available to them. And we need to be aware of these as we do this, so that know that we're not the only Big Four country struggling right now. So that's the only time we have for you this week on the Roundup. Thank you for making us a part of your weekly international edification, and we look forward to chatting with you in the weeks and months to come. So have a happy Labor Day weekend for those in the U.S., and looking forward to chatting with you again next week. Cheers.